Hello again, everyone. Edwin Leonard back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to be talking about transit Jupiter making a square opposition or inconjunct aspect to one's natal Uranus. Now, when we're talking about transits that involve Jupiter, well, they could be about expanding horizons, going outside the box, so to speak, enthusiasm, exuberance, optimism, hope, jocularity, joviality, truth, and veracity. Now, when transit Jupiter basically makes an adverse aspect to natal Uranus, but let me elaborate on that. When I say a basically adverse aspect, well, of course, squares and opposition aspects in astrology are adverse and negative, but the inconjunct aspect can be seen as neutral, but inconjuncts in astrology can have good and bad in them, and they also can be about adjustments and transitions, and of course those things can cause some tension and exasperation. So anyway, going back to transit Jupiter basically making an adverse aspect to natal Uranus may manifest in expanding horizons, going outside the box, so to speak, enthusiasm, exuberance, optimism, hope, jocularity, joviality, truth, veracity. Well, those things might conflict with friendships in some cases. It could be where one is simply not overly enthusiastic or exuberant about friendships. If it's, natal Uranus is in Capricorn, as an example, it could be older ones, or people that are very very serious and regimented. They might be people that are in a Capricorn type field, such as politics or government or business, as some examples. It can also be groups and clubs as well, as what you may not be overly excited or enthusiastic or exuberant about at this point in time. People in these groups and clubs and organizations, they might not be nearly as jocular or jovial as maybe they had been previously. And the thing too is, keep in mind that Jupiter is also connected with long distance travel. It's traveling abroad, and so those things might even conflict with friendships at this time, with groups, with clubs, organizations. You might feel at this time when you're not really that upbeat about society. You might not feel, it might be hard to see the good points and be positive regarding it at this point in time. I mean, say if the natal Uranus is in Sagittarius, you might be seeing a more negative in it, like society being overly self-righteous or reckless, or really maybe overly freedom-loving, as some examples. It can be something too where Uranus is also about what's erratic and sporadic. And the thing is, when you have this transit, it can be where your viewpoints, Jupiter is about our philosophy, opinions, beliefs. They may be a little bit more erratic and going kind of here. Maybe you might be thinking one way 1 minute about something, and then your opinion might change as well. And this is, again, Uranus can be very erratic and sporadic, and that could be a vast understatement. And the thing is too, beliefs may be a little might be really non-conforming at this time, and it might be, and could possibly be alienating some people at this time as well. Uranus is also very unpredictable energy, so you might be seeing Jupiterian people, whether it's people in philosophy or religion or higher education. It could be college professors. It could be publishers. They might be doing things that are surprising you or shocking you, and it'll be very good. I mean, we're talking about an adverse aspect, basically, collectively being made to Uranus by Jupiter in this transit. And maybe they're exhibiting some overly unusual or unorthodox behavior. I'm not saying that these people are going to be, climbing the walls, with suction cups on their hands, pretend to be Spider-Man or anything like that, or doing a tightrope, without netting. But the thing about it is, it can be where they might be a little bit more unpredictable, and it might be to your detriment. It could be something simple as just not being as timely as they had been. It might not be anything overly complex, but it could be something where it might be affecting you negatively. Now, anatomically speaking, Uranus is connected with the ankle, shins, calves, the nerves, the lower legs. And it can be a time where, if you have to be careful this time because Jupiter can be reckless. And it's something where, you have to be careful. Maybe, it could be an accident that might lead to an issue with what I described anatomically connected with Uranus. Jupiter is also associated with sports. So it's just being careful and more prudent than usual at this time. If you're involved in some vigorous sports activity, be a little bit more prudent than usual at this time. I mean, you need to be careful anyway and take the precautions, whether it's wearing the helmet or whatever you need to do depending on the sport you may be involved in. But it can be a greater propensity for, recklessness or something, that's sports related and might cause some kind of injury, to something Uranus related, against something like with the ankle, shins, calves, nerves, lower legs. And I would say it could be especially with the inconjunct aspect, because inconjuncts in astrology can often be about health related matters. And now another thing too is that Uranus is also connected with computers, with electronics. It's important to remember at this time that not to be overly enthusiastic about these things. And you could be on the internet, or you're waiting for some good news or something from somebody. And when you're talking about adverse aspects that involve Jupiter, it can manifest in over optimism and being overly enthusiastic about things. And it's really something too when you look at this transit as well. Keep in mind Uranus is connected with altruism and selflessness, and not to go really to the point where you're overly exuberant about these things and putting too much emphasis on this. As an example, remember Jupiter can be about distort. When you're talking about adverse aspects that involve Jupiter, it can be very distorted energy at times, and it can be a time where you're being maybe overly optimistic about matters. If you're involved in some kind of humanitarian work or altruism, it might be, maybe could simply be what you can accomplish at this time. It can be about whether, these things are going, to pan out according to plan, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish during this time. It can be something too, as well, where when you look at this transit, Uranus is connected with freedom and independence. So it might be a time where you may be Jupiter can be about hope, about optimism. Guard against being overly optimistic or enthusiastic about a freedom related issue. If you're trying to extricate yourself from a negative situation, say for example, if you have Uranus and Scorpio in the 7th house in your natal chart, you can be trying to get away from maybe a very controlling, perhaps manipulative significant other, or even a significant friendship, and it might not pan out the way that you originally anticipated. Now, another thing too, another way this transit may manifest is that there may be difficulty in finding enthusiasm for one's goals and aspirations at this time. Now, say for example, if the natal Uranus is in Sagittarius, it could be goals and aspirations associated with sports or horses, religion, philosophy, advertising or publishing, to name a few. It can be also to guard against, again, the over-optimism, being overly enthusiastic about matters with friends, groups, clubs, organizations. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, if Uranus is in Aquarius as an example, it could be one's friends, group-related people. It might be overly eccentric, or it might be an astrology or computer-related group, or something with electronics as some examples. Uh, Also, too, another thing is that another way this transit may be expressed, there may be philosophical differences with people in clubs, groups, or organizations. Now, let's say the transit Jupiter is in Taurus as an example. It can be, issues over beliefs regarding values, things of a monetary nature, material nature. It could be, persistence, maybe debating over what one needs to be persistent at, and what things they don't need to stay with. Uh, there may also be difficulty in seeing the truth in society at this time. Remember, Uranus can be connected with societies. Jupiter is connected with veracity and the truth. Now, for example, if the natal Uranus is in Capricorn, maybe it might be harder to see, the coldness, and a lot of the coldness in society, the callousness. Um, it might be, you know, um, where there might be also too at this time, another way this transit may pan out, there might be issues. If there's any issues with something Jupiter related, such as the liver, the hip, pancreas, sciatic nerve, as some examples, it may adversely affect your future. That could be true regardless of any transit that's happening if you're having issues with those, but it may be more intensified at this point in time compared to most periods in your life. Now, say if the natal Uranus is in Scorpio as an example, it could be maybe a future as being a locksmith or a psychologist, doing something with the occult, which includes astrology or forensics, investigation, embalming as some examples. And there might be more of a tendency to distort or exaggerate issues that can be connected with something physical that is Uranus related, such as something with the ankles or the shins, the calves, the lower legs, or the nerves. Or it can be something else Uranus related, which of course can encompass a lot, like such as friendships or acquaintances or groups, clubs, organizations, as some examples. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Leonard saying stay well.